We're here with Kevin Duggan, who's the city manager from Mountain View, California, and we're talking with him about his experiences in dealing with the challenges that local agencies face with regard to the fiscal crisis in California and the broader economic challenges that local agencies confront. So Kevin, tell us a little bit about what you're doing in Mountain View to address these challenges. What approaches are you taking? How are you trying to exercise leadership with the council, with the community, to help solve these difficult issues?
Yes, Don, this is a particularly challenging time, has been at least for the last couple of years, but again, I guess it's a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is we're experiencing this. The good news is we've been through these sorts of things before, and others have been through these before, and there's some good lessons that we've learned. One of the key lessons, and one of the things we try to do initially in regard to this challenge, is make sure all of our key constituent groups, ranging from the public to the press to certainly the city council, our employees, and any others we could identify, really understood why we were having this challenge. People know the economy is not great, but sometimes they don't really understand how that impacts local government, how it impacts different cities and different agencies in different sorts of ways. So we can't begin to engage people in a serious discussion of how to address these challenges unless they understand what is the challenge and how it occurred and what's the magnitude of it and what are the sorts of things that are necessary to address those. So we did a lot of work with those constituent groups on those themes, and then we began looking at the kinds of things we needed to do to address those. What we did locally was the most recent challenge for the current fiscal year was about a $4 million projected deficit out of about a $90 million general fund budget. What we talked to the council about early on was developing a four-pronged strategy, as we described it, really four different kinds of approaches, including, first of all, and in order to establish as much credibility as possible, looking at organizational efficiencies. We felt that was the first thing we needed to do. Even though we'd done that before and looked at efficiencies before, we needed to revisit that. The next thing we looked at was whether or not we were getting sufficient cost recovery for a variety of city services that were more discretionary services and served more of a specific population versus the overall city. Then we talked to our employee organizations and talked about the impact of employee compensation costs and how that related to our budget challenge, and engaged them in conversations about how to have that be part of the solution containing compensation cost growth. And then lastly, and for the public, we think we needed to communicate the message. The last thing we're going to do was to cut their services, the sorts of things that they relied on. I think sometimes people think we do that first, and we want to really communicate the message that from a leadership perspective, we were going to do that last. And we took this four-pronged approach and basically came up with a balanced budget by creating about $1 million worth of progress towards that goal from each of those four segments.
Okay, great. So what were some of the things that you've done creatively to try to engage the public? You're in the heart of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of dynamics there. People are busy. How do you get them to give even attention to this issue, much less, thoughtful consideration?
Right. Mountain View is a very diverse community, and clearly it is unique, maybe particularly unique by the nature of many of our population being in the high-tech industry and their expectations along those lines. So all we've needed to do is use a combination of traditional and maybe, again, these are also getting to be traditional, but maybe newer sorts of approaches that are also becoming the norm. The traditional sorts of things, related to those parts of our population that do expect to read it in our city newsletter, do expect us to have neighborhood meetings where we discuss and engage them in a conversation about those. Again, there's segments of our population that relate well to us in that regard. Again, for those who are much more tech oriented, they tend not to come out to meetings. They tend not to want to read a lot of written material that's sent to them in the mail. So we needed to figure out ways to communicate to them by putting videos on the web, by providing ways for them to get emails regarding the budget status of the city, for them to get resources, the same sorts of resources, but in different medium and at different times and basically on demand. That's one of the things we really have found out is people want to be able to access information when they want it, when it's convenient for them, which may not be when we schedule a particular meeting.